I like your enthusiasm and positivity in that too.
All right. I'm gonna go ahead and call to order this May 19th, 2026 budget meeting of Lynn Ben Lincoln Education Service District. Introductions. Just making sure it's, if you want to go ahead and lead off Hyro, and then we'll go around this way.
Hyro Bass, Cybersecurity Technician. Eddie Symington, Budget Committee Member Zone 7, or am I? Yeah, I'm here as Budget Committee.
All budget committee members.
Okay, Budget Committee Zone 7.
They just said we are all budget.
Well,
Purposes
meeting right
of
now
this
at
meeting.
the budget committee. Yes.
Oh, okay. Denise Staffen, budget committee member. So, oh, no, doesn't matter. Okay.
Buildings Budget Committee member, Zone 1 Director.
Michael Thompson, Budget Committee member, ESD Zone.
Rob Luer, Executive Financial Officer. Jason Hayes, Superintendent.
Amy Vetter, Board Director for Zone 5 and Budget Director for tonight.
Miriam Cummins, Chief Aya, Budget Committee for the ESD Zone 6.
Ted Jones, Executive IT Officer.
Christine O'Malley, Executive Director of Resources.
And Jason Shane, Executive Assistant and Board Secretary.
Okay, thank you. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next item on the agenda is just legal responsibilities for the budget committee. So the budget committee has a legal responsibility on an annual basis to hear a budget proposal from ESD staff and to pass a budget for the next fiscal year that goes from July 1 to June 30th. And so in this case, July 1 of 2026 to June 30th of 2027. And in a part of the governance structure for this is that what we hope to do tonight is to pass a budget as a budget committee. And then we are legally obligated to hold a hearing at a later meeting. And so what we will do in terms of structure here is if the budget passes tonight, then we will hold a budget hearing, hold space for a budget hearing during the June board meeting, in which case then the board after that hearing would adopt the budget as presented. And then it goes right into our next fiscal year. So that's kind of roughly what it is. You can see on page, and this is of your packet, is page 14 of your packet, but page 3 of the budget gives you a bit of an overview and financial framework around ESDs and funding that you will see in the details as Rocco goes through information and certainly in the budget document that you've had a chance to review. With that, I'll entertain any questions that you may have.
I was just gonna comment that the budget hearing, it's just essentially for members of the public if they wish to give comment.
Yeah. And in the last 6 years that I have been here, we have not had any members of the public that have come to comment on the budget. And so it would be, I would be shocked if that were to happen, but it certainly could.
It is always
It
possible.
is always possible. This is a public process and it needs to be a public process per statute.
All right, and then the next up is the election of budget committee officers. So we just pick who we want to be presiding officer and who we want to be vice presiding officer, essentially who we want to chair this meeting. Anyone can nominate anyone. Pretty straightforward, nothing to challenge. Everyone's just staring at each other.
I'd nominate Amy Vetter to chair the budget committee.
Second.
All right, it has been moved and seconded for Amy Vetter to chair the budget committee meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against say no. All right. It has been unanimously approved for me to chair the budget meeting. All right, now, next up is approving a vice presiding officer.
I'll nominate Miriam as vice presiding officer at the budget committee.
Second,
And there's 2 seconds.
I think 2 of us actually, or.
I came in later.
I think Amy.
I maybe. I
Edged out.
Okay. Sorry. All right, it has been moved and seconded to nominate Miriam Cummins as vice presiding officer. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say no. All right, it has been unanimously approved to have Miriam Cummins as vice presiding officer. All right, and then at the fun beginning. So next up is minutes from the previous year. So I have so much paperwork going on. I want to make sure that I have.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Perfect.
Get back in there. So something we get forward. Can you hear us okay? Perfect. Thank you for coming. This is Jason Hayes, Superintendent. We appreciate you being here this evening.
Yeah, sorry, I got a little challenge logging in, but I'm good. Sorry, I can't be there in person, but I'm out of town.
Well, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. If you want to just go ahead and introduce yourselves to the group, that would be fantastic.
Okay, great. Yes, I'm Todd Noble. I'm the health administrator for Lynn County, and had the pleasure to be asked to be on this committee. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, we very much appreciate you giving up your time to be here for this. All right, so we were just sort of towards the beginning here. So we are looking at the minutes from our last budget meeting last year, and I wanted to see if anyone had comments or questions. Those are on pages 3 through 5.
Move the acceptance of the previous minutes from May 21st, 2025.
Second.
All right, it has been moved and seconded to approve the May 21st, 2025 Budget Committee meeting minutes. Any further discussion? All right, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. All right, it has been unanimously approved, the minutes for the Budget Committee meeting from May 21st, 2025. Ready for this year's presentation.
You're right. So Rocco is going to share his screen. We have a slide deck to walk through with you here. And so Todd, hopefully you can see this on your end here in just a moment. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, I see it just fine. Thank you.
That's great. Excellent. Okay, so thank you all for being here this evening. This is our budget proposal presentation for the 26-27 fiscal year. And so we're just going to dive right in here. So the mission of LBL is through services and collaboration with our community schools and families, we empower every child with skills and resources needed for success, fostering innovation and responsiveness in education. And this budget that is presented to you is very complex in multiple sources of revenue and different types of expenditures in order to fulfill this mission and the complexity of our organization. You can see the values that the board has adopted in the past as a part of the strategic plan for from children and family first all the way through sustainability. I will tell you that in the preparation of this budget, as our executive team has worked and planned through to build this budget, as Rocco and I have had many different conversations in developing this budget, these values guide us very much. I look to them to make sure that as we think about how we want to spend our money in an equitable way, which means that it is not always equal in terms of how we allocate resources, we need to look through and keep these values as a signpost for us. I also want to acknowledge our equity lens as a part of this process. Our team utilizes the equity lens that the board has adopted. You will remember, and the board will remember, and this is information for you, Todd, just as informational, but we reviewed the equity lens during the board retreat. And I am planning on bringing back and working a little bit with our equity and diversity committee, that's our staff committee, to bring back a proposal in the future, for any possible adjustments that the board might consider as we go into this next fiscal year. Also related to this, and I think is very much an important aspect of our budget process and how we allocate resources, is to always look through this lens, think about who our budget impacts, who has opportunities, who is included, who is not included, and whose voices need to be at the table as we go forward in this. And the budget development process is highly iterative, has multiple different cycles of touch points with administrators and staff, and also our component districts. And so this is something that I will bring this information back. I actually, and this is a whole nother conversation that's not really for today, but I'll just foreshadow a conversation that I am planning to have at the next board meeting regarding the revision of the equity lens, and also how I'm looking to create a superintendent work group around equity that can dovetail with our staff equity committee. So just a little bit of information about that. And then the other thing in terms of context that's important for us to look at is we build a budget that is largely driven by our local service plan. And so the ESD and the component districts develop a local service plan on an annual basis. It honestly gets fleshed out with more detail on a more of a biennial basis. But it is in statute in that ORS call out there that we must adopt a local service plan on an annual basis, and we need to include services in the 4 core areas, which are special education, technology support, school improvement, and administration and supportive services. And so we look at the LSP as a driver of what is it that we need to do. The LSP is the what. It also comprises a little bit of the why of what we do. And then we get into the budget, starts to articulate the how that we go about this. And so the LSP comprises, it says, are all services provided by the ESD. It also includes contracts and grants. That is not just the resolution dollars that are the general fund resolution dollars that include that 4.5% of the state school fund, but also grants like ECSC, long-term care and treatment, regional inclusive services. So you'll see that as we go through this. So some of the other services that are articulated in the budget here are non-LSP grants. And so we are involved in a few other grants. In the first bullet point there, Medicaid administrative claims happens to be, as you know, we in this past year, we've actually had to come back and do reappropriation regarding Medicaid administrative claims, because the department that Nancy oversees and the staff that work with Medicaid reimbursement have done so well at bringing money into our districts. The money flows through the ESD that we've had to come back and do a reallocation within the budget. But those are federal monies that flow into the ESD and then also flow through the ESD to our districts. That's just different than the resolution dollars. And another example of a non-LSP grant is our Grow Your Own. This is a grant that we've had over the course of the last 2 years, and we're actually in year 3. I'm looking to Nancy, that's correct, right? This is year 3 of that grant. In terms of supporting new staff or hopefully new staff for school districts in our region around becoming teachers, and particularly in hard to fill areas. Other areas that you'll see in the budget, things like debt service, that captures our payment on our bond debt from our capital project. We have capital project monies that are captured in this budget. Purchase services, because we provide services to many districts outside of our region, outside of our component districts, and we also do purchase services to our school districts in our region. There are many different aspects of the budget that come through the purchase services. And the final one, and this will actually be a change, and Rocco will talk more about this, is that we have been acting the past several years as the fiscal agent for Oregon Association of ESDs, OAESD. That is going to be a change for us in the future. We are not going to operate as the fiscal agent in this coming year. And so that's something that we're divesting of, and we'll get into some details around that in terms of the numbers there. So one of the, and I realized that I missed a misspelling there in management. So I should say continuous financial management. This is one of those things where you look at something over and over and then realize once you're in front of an audience, there it is. Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
glad to know that you typed this.
Exactly. So some of what I think is important in terms of understanding how the budget is developed, we work really hard as an executive team with our administrative team to continually review what our numbers look like, what continually I keep an eye on how revenue comes in, whether it is changed, whether it is a constant. We look at expenditures, we are tracking payroll and staffing, and you can see there in those first 2 sub bullet points, on a monthly basis, every single program runs through a review where we review revenues, payrolls, expenditures, encumbrances. So encumbrances, just as an education thing for you, if you don't know this word, are planned expenditures that are on the books that we actually put on there. We know they're expenditures that are coming, and then also projections. And so we're continually going through this iterative process so that we have a really solid idea of where we are. This is what creates the circumstances for 0 surprises. Now, it doesn't mean that every once in a while our executive team wouldn't be surprised about something. Sometimes we get surprises from ODE. Sometimes we get surprises, through legislative action that happens in terms of what budget can look like. There might be big changes in enrollment that might be a surprise. But for the most part, our process by doing these monthly reviews keeps us well informed as it goes through. So what this does is it provides a real-time comprehensive review of our financial position, our organizational conditions. It allows us to forecast and do timely operational adjustments. So this is something I'm really proud of as a leader, and I'm proud of our team in this, is that we have this forward look and this iterative look that happens on such a regular basis that we are able to adjust and modify as we go through a biennium, and even look into the next biennium, and sometimes even the biennium following that, that allows us to make adjustments that we anticipate so that we don't end up in one of those situations like sometimes districts could be in, where they have a big surprise and all of a sudden they're laying staff off mid-year. We have not been in that position, knock on wood that we won't be in that position, but it does allow us to be in a good spot to not have to make mid-year adjustments or even mid-biennial adjustments. So in terms of, I've talked a little bit about the budget development. So this annual budget development is a natural extension of the ongoing work that I just outlined. This yearly process of presenting a budget is not just a standalone process. It is always important to have early identification, have testing of assumptions and constraints, and look at strategies for how we make adjustments as it goes throughout the year. One of the things that I learned early on in my executive career, and I was taught from a prior CFO years ago, that always, kind of shocked me in terms of, and I sort of thought it was funny, that we would present the budget and the budget would get adopted. And he would say, just so you know, as soon as we adopt that budget, it's already out of date. It was a projection at a point in time. And so that's what this is. We have to have an iterative process to be able to look continuously at things, to know where we're at on top of things. The other thing that I think is important to recognize is a budget gives you spending authority. It doesn't necessarily mean that's the amount of money that we're going to spend, but it creates appropriation. So one of the annual processes that we need to go through is we need to take a little bit of time, and if you'll indulge me, I'm going to read our budget message, our superintendent's budget message, and then if I remember right in our slide deck, after I do that, it goes to you.
I think you're done.
And then I can stop talking. So here we go. Okay, so I'm pleased to submit the proposed budget for the Lynn Benton Lincoln Education Service District for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2026 and ending June 30th, 2027. It is an honor to serve the districts of Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln counties, and I remain deeply committed to supporting our schools, educators, and students through high-quality, cost-effective services. As we look ahead, our work continues to center on meeting the evolving needs of our districts across the region. Demand for services, particularly in special education, technology, and student support, continues to grow in both scale and complexity. In response, we've focused on strengthening how we deliver services, improving coordination across programs, and ensuring that our efforts are aligned with the priorities of the districts we serve. Our staff remains deeply committed to delivering high-quality services to the children, families, and districts we serve. Their work continues to make a meaningful impact across the region. At the same time, it's important to acknowledge that resource constraints limit our ability to fully meet the growing and increasingly complex needs of our constituents. This reality reinforces the importance of disciplined resource allocation, strategic prioritization, and continued advocacy for sustainable funding. Supporting the staff who deliver these services remains a central priority. We are intentional about fostering a workplace grounded in ethical practice, authentic communication, compassionate positivity, and an inclusive mindset. One where people feel respected, supported, and connected to the work and to each other. This foundation helps create an environment that is not only a good place to work, but one that is resilient in the face of the emotional and operational demands inherent in our services. Balancing competitive compensation, workforce stability, and these cultural commitments requires disciplined management of both operations and resources, ensuring the agency remains responsive and capable of meeting district needs over time. At the core of this work is a commitment to continuous improvement. Over the past year, we've refined how we plan, communicate, and operate as an agency. Monthly program reviews have continued to evolve and are now more robust than ever, bringing together operational, staffing, and service considerations in a consistent and transparent way. This structure keeps leadership teams closely connected to the work and to each other, strengthening coordination across departments and improving our ability to respond to emerging needs in a timely and thoughtful manner. Over the past year, the agency has made meaningful progress in several key areas. Reorganization efforts within key service areas, including technology and special education, to improve consistency, coordination, and service delivery across districts. strengthening partnerships with component districts through regular engagement, feedback systems, and direct operational support when needed. Full implementation of standardized monthly program reviews and forward-looking planning practices, strengthening coordination, visibility, and decision-making across the agency. Continued implementation of the cultural compass with a growing focus on integrating its principles into hiring, onboarding, and leadership practices. Continued development of regional initiatives, including cybersecurity readiness efforts and programs that support workforce development and student success. And expansion of regional services and partnerships, including cybersecurity training, district support services, and grant-funded initiatives, such as the Grow Your Own program. So this budget reflects the ongoing work of aligning our services with district needs while maintaining a focus on quality, consistency, and responsiveness. It is developed using the best information available at the time and represents a continuation of the agency's efforts to thoughtfully plan for both current operations and future demands. As we move forward, our focus remains on listening, adapting, and working in partnership with districts to ensure that services remain relevant, effective, and supportive of local priorities. I appreciate the time and dedication of our budget committee members and look forward to our continued collaboration. Thank you.
All right, so let's see if we can take a look at some of the numbers behind. I'm going to walk through a couple foundational pieces just to refresh us before we get to those. So first off, making sure that we understand our fund type. So we are going to adopt a budget per fund. So let's make sure we know what's in there. So the general fund accounts for all of our financial resources of the districts, except those required to be accounted for in another fund. So mostly what we're receiving into there, that is our general fund allocation that comes from the state school fund allocation, our tax revenues, and then it's indirect expenses on the grant, and some interest income. Special revenue and funds, so that's our grants and contracts. So this accounts for the proceeds of specific revenue sources that are legally restricted to the expenditures for specified purposes. This is mostly grants and contracts, but does have some portion of stuff that is inside the ESD that says the districts have told us we are allowed to set aside some of this money for a future expenditure on X. That too is a restricted revenue, so it is accounted for in this category. The debt service fund strictly accounts for the principal and interest payments on our long-term debt. Our capital projects fund account for financial resources used to construct major capital facilities. And finally, our internal service fund accounts for goods and services provided to other districts, and to other governmental units. So that's sort of where you would find our sort of mini enterprises is inside the internal service fund. Assumptions. Your budget is only as good as your assumptions. So let's take a look first at our resource assumptions. So where are we getting our resources from? So two things, big ones on here. The general fund, we are basing how much general fund we anticipate coming in from the March 26th estimate from the state. So that's specific to the ESD. And we are projected at $12.372 million from the state fund. And that includes projected local tax revenue of $10.325 million. Other big resource assumptions are our grants. So all of our grants are budgeted for the best available information, right? And I have to couch that because we have all kinds of different information depending on which grant it is. We use the best information available. The good news is we are going into the second year of the biennium, and these are biennial grants. So we have a very high degree of confidence in the 2026-27 amounts that we receive on grants. Essentially, we have commitments on the state portion on there. The federal funds are still unknown. So as we approach unknown federal funds, which is a smaller portion, what we generally assume is that the federal funds will be flat from one year of the biennium to the other, which is a pretty good safe assumption. Right? We're going to hope it's a little bit more than that.
In the internal service fund, when we estimate revenue, we go through each and every initiative to estimate it on there. So that'll be things like, we will go through and say, hey, we sell synergy services to non-component districts. Who are the districts? How much is the contract for? And let's put that in the budget, and we will go through each and every service that way in order to estimate out what we'll receive in the internal service fund. Expenditures. So when we get into expenditures, there are a couple of major assumptions that we have to keep in mind. So the first is our staffing costs. So what happens with our staffing costs, depending on the position, it would receive between a 3.5% and a 5% cost of living adjustment for licensed, classified, and administrative staff per the existing agreements and commitments. So we know which position it is, and we know what we're on the hook for. We estimate that cost per position. We also go through and we incorporate a 3.25% step increase for all staff who are eligible for that. So that is essentially any staff member that is not already at the terminal step of their rate. PERS rates are a big component here. So we have a blended PERS rates of 25.25%. So you pay PERS based off of whether they are tier 1, tier 2, or whether they are OPSERV employees. 90% of our employees are OPSERV. We blend the rate through. That blended rate between the two comes out to that 25.25. In an insurance cap of $14.50 per month per 1.0 FTE. So that says that's full insurance coverage at the $14.50 cap for everybody who's a full-time employee. Before I get into this, any questions on any of the assumptions, whether revenue or expense?
You budget the insurance cap as if everyone takes the full, but you have opt-outs and.
We don't have opt-outs. We're not on composite rate. So there is no opt-out on there. So we budget everything as it is the $14.50. Yep. Okay, also looking at, before we get to the numbers here, taking a look at the strategic direction and priorities that you will see. This is a bit of methodology of what you will see in the budget, why we budget the levels that we are. So looking at our strategic budget priorities on here, we want to balance off conservatism and accuracy to ensure appropriate deployment of resources. It is good to be conservative. It is not good to be overly conservative. That makes you under deploy resources, right? You want to try and be as accurate as possible without being aggressive. You want to ensure alignment of services with organizational goals and the evolving needs of the region. So we're examining all the expenditures in the budget to make sure that they're aligned with what they're supposed to be delivering. That they are supporting sustainable operations while remaining responsive to future challenges and opportunities. So we are going to have some things in there that are speculative, that we have new services that we are going to try and bring online. We're going to make sure that those are in there, and we're going to make sure that we are still leaving ourselves the space to meet our obligations. Prioritize clarity and consistency in resource planning to strengthen coordination and trust. This translates into you shouldn't be seeing any surprises in here. We talk to you about our financial position all year long. We want to make sure that that follows through. That is equally as true with our staff. We've been talking to them about how things go all year long, and there shouldn't be any big gotcha surprises that you see in the budget. And finally, we want to maintain flexibility to meet the operational obligations in context where funding lags needs. So we're going to make sure we leave ourselves some reserve. So appropriation requests and reserves. So when we deploy something, when we ask for an appropriation, the appropriation authority is requested to ensure that we have flexibility in deploying resources as needs arise. So that speaks to Jason's, we are going to have more in the budget than we actually anticipate on spending, but we want to make sure we've put something in there so that if something happens, we have the ability to do it. We want to make sure we have full utilization of all budgeted resources, but we do not anticipate using everything that we're putting in the budget. The appropriation levels are set to enable timely response to emerging needs and priorities, right? We are only allowed to spend what is appropriated. We don't want to get ourselves in a situation where in order to meet an obligation, we need to come back to this table and do a supplementary budget in order to continue our expenditures. And we are appropriating the funds therefore at levels where we are prepared but not overcommitted. That's the goals of the deployment. On the reserve side, to make sure that we're not spending everything in tank, our reserves represent the projected ending fund balance and support long-term financial stability. So when we see things that are on there for contingency and future reserves, we wouldn't anticipate spending either one of those. They would be the ending fund balance that we are anticipating. The reserve levels that you'll see in the budget here all meet or exceed the ESD's policy of maintaining 4 to 8 weeks of operating reserves. So our policy does state that it is important that we can operate for 2 months solid if all funding dries up. That gives us the flexibility we need in case of emergency. Adequate reserves ensure continuity of service and resilience in the face of the uncertainty, so we do want to make sure that we maintain them. And it's going to demonstrate our commitment to prudent and responsible fiscal management. Significant changes in the budget. There are really only 2 significant things that are changing from the current operation into next year. So the first one, no surprise here, our Medicaid administrative claims, we are going to increase that from last year's budgeted 9 million to a budget of 12 million in volume based off of recent trending. I love doing this because every year when I put the number out, Nancy crushes it and then we send more money to our districts. So I thought about putting like 22 million in here and see if she can do it. But I think 12 is a pretty reasonable level. We're getting pretty full on there. We're really glad to be putting that volume in. And then the second significant change is that we are divesting of OAESD on July 1st. So that would be a decrease in operational expenditures in the internal service fund by about $965,000. So we normally would budget their full availability to be spent. That won't be on there. What does come in is we're going to appropriate a $450,000 transfer, which will be transferring anything that they may have left over in the tanks to their new home. 450 is unlikely to occur. They're probably going to be lower than that, but this is a figure, it's such a specific figure. I didn't want to put something in small and then have to come back to the table if they had a really banner conference and had extra cash off of it. Those are the only 2 real significant changes that are in the budget. As we look across our funds, what we're looking at is a $90.3 million budget. Which is a little bit deceiving because a lot of that represents things that we don't actually do. For instance, we have nearly $10 million of leave it there for reserves, right? It would include that. And you'll see $20 million of transfers. Some of that is transferring outside of our organization. Some of that is transferring internally. But what you'll also see on here, which I think is the most important view that you get, is the magnitude of each one of the funds that we're spending. So you'll see the general fund and the special revenue fund are roughly equivalent in size. So the things that we provide through tier 1 and tier 2, plus the operation of the ESD in total, we do that equal volume in serving our grants for the region. You'll see debt service and capital projects are relatively small figures in there, and the internal service fund at 14 million is not quite half the size of one of those 2 funds, but it's still a really significant piece of what we do.
Okay, do you mind going back to the slide before this one? Okay, could you just repeat what you said about the 450,000?
So the 400. Sure, the 450,000. So on June 30th, OAESD, we will shake hands and say it's been a great time, and we will have $450,000 of their money thereabouts sitting on our books. When they move, we need to send that money to the new place because it's not ours, it's theirs. So the budget includes the appropriation, the ability for us to transfer that 450,000 to another entity.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, full-time staffing equivalency. So you'll see, again, I think the best takeaway here is how much staffing is in each one of these funds. And you'll see, not surprisingly, the general fund and the special revenue fund run roughly equivalent FTE levels. There are no FTE affiliated with debt service or capital projects. And then we run about half the amount of FTE, a little bit less than that, in the internal service fund. In total, we are running staffing at about 246 FTE, or we can even say about 250 FTE across the organization. Trending. So this is really important context, is where have we been and where do we think we're going to? So you'll see, if we look past the past couple of years, we've had that sort of 85, 87, we're knocking on the door of about $90 million of resources per year. That's right what we're seeing in the current year. Fits in well with the trend. And then if you eyeball through the most important lines to look at on here, I would look at the salaries and the associated payroll costs. And what you will generally see on there is a gradual uptick, and that's going to be associated mostly with cost of living adjustments, because we're keeping roughly the same level of FTE year over year, but we're seeing increases in the salary expenditures as inflation rises. You will also see that commensurate increase in the associated payroll costs, where PERS costs and healthcare costs rise along with the salaries. Budgeted FTE, just so you can see what we budgeted last year versus what we are budgeted for this current year versus what we would budget for next year. These are, we're going to call them roughly equivalent. Don't read too much into any number changing. There are a number of nuances in the system that wouldn't naturally be intuitive. So for instance, if you look at the general revenue fund and you say, wow, a decrease of 4 FTE, what would cause that? It's not always a decrease in FTE. Sometimes it's things like we may anticipate, based off where we currently are, we're going to have more contract house FTE because we were unable to fill it with fully staffed FTE. You'll see changes in that. Sometimes what you'll see is a transfer of FTE between funds. The main line that we take a look at is that grand total, saying, are we roughly equivalent? And this is virtually dead on. Staffing has moved around, but we're still running at the same size.
I think one thing to just reflect on here, and this is certainly something that we are proud of where we are right now, and the strength of our budget and our budgetary planning, is that we have basically the same amount of FTE versus some of the cuts that some of the organizations around the state are seeing. And so we don't have the more volatile up and down of, oh, we staffed up for this, but now we're laying people off. And so it is something that we're proud of, to see that, okay, we are maintaining our staffing levels.
I'm curious. So those listed on the special revenues, those might be like grants and things like that.
Those are the grants. Those are the major grants that you're seeing there. So regional inclusive, the Students Success Act and related grants. There's a bunch of them that we sort of cross-fund positions with. TNF's very small. EIECSE is our largest grant. You'll see that's the largest bulk of FTE and the long-term care treatment. Those are the major grants. Okay, so let's dive into the specifics of each one of the funds. So I always find this view to be very informative, with a short short list of numbers that you have to look at. So what we'll do is we start looking at the beginning fund balance. We're going to say what resources come in, how much do we spend in operating expenses, so actually paying for the business that we're doing, how much do we transfer off, whether that is sending out to somebody else or sending over to another fund, and then how much do we maintain in reserves. So you see 2 years of actuals on here, and you'll see the beginning fund balance. It went from that 7.6 to 8.8 million. We had ending fund balances of the 8.8 and 9.7. We compare to the 25-26 budget because we don't have a finished year to compare to. So you'll see we only anticipated a beginning fund balance of 7.8 million. We actually ended with about 9.7 million. But you'll see those other resources that are coming in and those operating expenditures trend relatively smoothly year to year. You'll see the transits are relatively smooth. And then the reserves represent the amounts that we're saying we're not going to have this. Those are our operating contingencies and things that we reserve for future use. As we look at the general fund resources, there are a lot of places that it comes from. But as you look on this list, the big ones that should catch your eye, the ad valorem taxes, that's our local tax revenue. That's where you see that 10,325 that I listed before. You'll see the state school fund, that 12,372 number. You'll see the beginning fund balance, and those are the biggest figures that are going into the fund. You'll see that grant fee figure, that $2.5 million. Those are indirect fees that we collect off of our grants. So that's the grant paying their fair share of centralized operating costs. And then you'll see a smattering of other things like earnings from interest or rentals, which is going to be a new one for us with new leasing arrangements. On the general fund requirements, this is the broad buckets that the money gets spent on. You'll see it's almost always payroll is going to be the biggest figure that you'll see. So salaries, you'll see the last year's budget of 9.3 going up to the anticipated 9.5. The affiliated associated payroll costs coming in at the $5.4 million. Most of that is influenced by that PERS rate, that 25.25 is what's driving the majority of it. And then you'll see purchase services, and this is where I'll call your attention. So when you see in 23, 24, and 24, 25, we're spending in that $1 million to $1.4 million range. The budgets are a higher amount. That is us appropriating amounts that we are not likely to spend, right? But that is leaving the full reserve available should it be used. This is an important thing inside of the general fund because of what we do with it. So we think of the general fund in 3 buckets. So our 105 bucket is what operates the ESD. So when we say that 10% of resolution revenues operate the ESD plus the other things, you'll see that 105 is what pays for things like the business office and superintendent's office and HR and some technology and whatnot. 110 is our tier 1 service. So 110 is set by the Visa superintendents who approved a budget of 15.625 million to be spent on the tier 1 services they want this year. And you'll see there's a beginning fund balance down there of 551,000. That includes both operating contingency and one-time money that Visa superintendents have at their disposal to employ. 120 is tier 2. So that is money that our districts can spend outside of tier 1 that are provided through our resolution revenues. And all that happens with that one is the money comes in and it gets transferred and spent somewhere else. It's really important, though, to notice that beginning fund balance of tier 2 of $2.5 million. When you look at our beginning fund balance, you have to remember a lot of the money that is there is not ours. It belongs to our districts. We can't deploy it on anything other than them. They direct those funds, not us.
And if I remember it well, we understand that that's a fund that they can choose to spend or carry over to the next.
That's correct. They can leave it there. They can spend it. That is theirs and it stays theirs indefinitely through the end of time. All right. All right. So this is the requirement, so you can see by sub-fund, same thing, where the expenditure is going. You'll see much smaller salaries because we have a smaller operating profile for things like business services and whatnot versus all of the labor that goes into serving tier one, right? And same thing with the associated payroll costs. You will see there is larger purchasing stuff over on the 105 side because we are purchasing a lot of central supplies for the agency out of that fund. And the ending fund balance, that $5.8 million stays with the 105 fund. All right, special revenue fund. Now, the special revenue fund we'll look at a little bit differently. We'll start with this view again, but we would always expect that it's going to have a lower beginning fund balance because grants themselves don't have balances on there. So the only balance you see are those funds where we said something like, somebody said, you can in the future use this money to spend on a specific purpose. It sits in that fund and you'll see those funds are sitting around that level. That's what a beginning fund balance would be here. Other than that, resources in that we're going to get. So that's what we would anticipate getting in from grants and contracts, the operational expenditures we have, and how much we will transit out of those funds to other places. We'll show this view because you're supposed to show this view. This is probably the one where you can actually see that 3299 account you see with nearly $20 million. That is the state resource funding. So nearly $20 million comes from the state. If you look 2 lines down, you'll see less than 4 million comes from federal. So that's what I'm saying, where when we know our state number, but we don't know our federal, we're not as volatile with a change, percentage change in the federal number that we would be in the state number. The other thing you'll see, that other restricted revenue, that 9 million going to 12 million, that is the Medicaid administrative claims funds. That's where you see that figure coming through. And then the beginning fund balance represents those held expenditures. This is a better way to look at it. This tells the story of the agency a little better. We anticipate $14 million availability on the EIE-CSE grant, nearly 4 million for regional inclusive, 3 million for long-term care and treatment, and then you'll see there are smaller grants of the Student Success Act and related, TNF, and what I'm going to call this category of de minimis special revenue. So this is if you lump up together a whole bunch of really small grants or things that have already stopped, things that on their own aren't really all that significant, we put it in a bucket. The only reason you see something as large as 700,000 on here, every year we put a budget in for unanticipated grant revenue. So if we are successful in procuring additional grants on here, once again, we don't have to come in just to get permission to spend a grant because we're always on the hunt for something outside of these. If we don't get it, we can't spend it. And then you'll see the Medicaid administrative claims and the other restricted funds there as well.
When you look at the different grants that's up there, are all of those kind of staying around the same compared to like last year? Like,
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they're all trending. They're all trending relatively the same. It's an odd nuance. The state likes to distribute things. The first year in the biennium, they give you 49% of the biennial value. In the second year, they give you 51%. When we do the biennial budget, the second year though, what we really look at is how much did we not spend so far? And then how much will be left over in total? So what we're looking at is generally how much is left over in total. It is more than the previous year because we do save space for increases and raises and whatnot on there. And because it happens to be the way things operate, we typically mid-biennium in some of the grants will get the state found extra money. There's an extra $400,000 in here and we don't find out until 11 months into running the grant. So the second year of the biennium is almost always larger. Looking at the expenditures, you'll see a very similar set of distribution from what you saw in the general fund. So again, you have that sort of $9 million figure of salaries, you have the associated payroll cost, purchase services coming through, and then you'll see smaller amounts in there for supplies and materials and whatnot, capital outlay. The supplies and materials in the 26-27, that 1.9 million, that says we anticipate that $2 million that we have reserved where our districts have said, hey, it's okay to spend this money in the future on XYZ equipment. We put it in the budget so that if it needs to be spent, it can be. It doesn't mean that we necessarily already have plans to do that. So for instance, we could redo the entire server room because we have availability to do it. We put it on there just in case we want to. Chances are we're not going to.
Things like, in what fund do we have things like, professional development?
It would be in every single fund.
Oh,
So in every single fund, as we look at it, it would be captured in the purchased services category that's on there. Each fund has the availability to allocate amounts towards travel. And the travel dollars will have things like professional development inside of it. But it's important to say, it's not a discretely budgeted item. We don't have an account that says this is how much professional development's there. We have an account that says this is how much travel is available.
And it's all broken out by the fund and by the grant.
Right.
And so it's not as though you could look in the budget and say, how much do we spend on professional development for our staff holistically? You'd have to look in multiple places to be able to do that.
Okay, debt service fund is easy. We tend to run a zero balance in it. We transfer $475,000 a year into there so that we can pay our debt. And that's the end of the story.
Favorite one.
Yep, that's great. So we'll pay that off. 475 will go in and go out. Capital projects is a similar story. So we have about $2 million sitting in the capital projects fund that's available for major expenditures. You'll see what we do again. We sort of say, hey, let's make sure that we leave space in case we want to deploy 1.5 million of it. We're not going to. But if we got there and we said, wow, we have an opportunity to do something and we want to be able to deploy it, it gives us the ability to do it. One thing I will call out here, which is important when thinking about fund balances, what you don't see in this budget is us putting additional money into the capital projects fund. Right, so keep in mind that anytime if a balance accumulated either in the internal service fund or in the general fund, at some point in time, there's a bill to be paid with keeping things current, and we're not currently transferring money into the capital projects fund. And at some point in time in the future, we would have to restart doing that. We're not doing it right now because after just having spent $15 million on redoing the building, it's not like today's dollars immediately have to be shoveled away in order to get in there, but eventually we will have to start pushing money back into this account.
And for context, knowing that the number at some point will need to be far bigger than this, prior to our renovation, we were on an annual basis, putting $400,000 to $500,000 away into the capital improvement fund, which is about how we paid for about half of that renovation. Was money that we had actually sought to win gradually over the course of many years.
Are you currently thinking about when we might and how much we might start shuffling some funds into this?
Not quite so concerned with it because we do have ample reserves sitting somewhere else. So what we would really be thinking about is, hey, there's money sitting in the beginning balance of the general fund, and we could just say, take $750,000 and put it in the capital fund if we needed to do it. So because we have ample reserves setting both of those, we're not quite as concerned. But truthfully, you would take a look at the total amount of plant you have and you'd say, I need to replace X amount of it over a 20-year cycle. And you're going to pick a number, something like $500,000 a year, or even up to $750,000 a year.
Buildings always just make me nervous, right?
Yeah.
I think we probably all in our time attended a school that was falling apart.
Yep.
I never want to have anyone in a facility falling apart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I want a safe, warm and dry place for
absolutely.
people to work, and
Yeah.
so I'm always.
Yeah, and when you think about, and one of the things that, and we will plan for this by looking closely at what we might anticipate in the future. So for example, there's about, I think it's 23 HVAC units on the roof of this building. Each one of those, if one goes out, we're talking between $25,000 and $45,000. And so you have to have a certain plan, knowing that some things are going to fail, maybe even before their projected end of life. And so as we plan for things and think about, okay, well, what would we anticipate we need to do? So this last year, you heard, that we anticipated needing to do a modernization of the elevator. So we could plan for that inside of what we have here. And as we get further down, because as you project out further and as a building and the systems in the building get older, your cushion has to increase, because if something is within 5 years of end of life, it could go kaput at any time. It could be tomorrow, or it could be 7 years from now.
Yeah.
How many facilities do we have?
Just this one.
Just this one.
Yep.
We lease or whatever other.
Yep, all of the others are through lease agreements.
Yeah.
So I have a question on this one. I'm trying to look at what's on our budget paper here on page 96 of 124 on our packet, on our budget packet. And I see here that says 2022-23 actual, but on mine here it says 23-24 with the same information and the same for 24-25, you have it as 23-24, but the number is different.
Hold on just a second here. So you're looking, I'm just catching up to page 96.
24 from our packet.
Okay,
Fund balance, right, capital, projects. And I'm seeing, but on the screen it says 22-23 actual. But on here it's 23-24 actual with the.
Oh, I see. So
Oh,
up on the
I'm
screen.
sorry, I'm
Yes.
sorry, my dates up on the top of this one are 1 year off.
So the first column there
Yeah.
could be
23-24.
23-24.
okay,
24-25. Yep. Yep, good catch.
okay, so I just wanted to make sure, because I was
That was a very
like,
good catch.
I'm trying to follow along as you're speaking, because I like to have the numbers in front of me. So which one is correct?
It's the first column here should be 23-24.
Got it, okay, I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure, okay,
So the figures are correct, the date numbers are
Yeah.
wrong.
okay,
Yeah.
So
okay.
what is in the package? Is that
The packet's correct.
the package is?
The
Yeah,
slide.
packet's correct, the slide is.
The proposed budget is correct for the one.
The
Yeah, is correct. Yes, which is the better way for us, so we don't have to be able to note things if we get to a spot where you feel comfortable approving the budget.
So just real quick, so I'm here on the 23-24 on our side. So is the first column then just the only difference is we're pretty much just moving
The year.
the year?
Yep, the year.
Mhm,
Yep.
That's it, right?
Yep, it would be 23-24, the first column, the second column would be 24-25.
So on here too, on the ending fund balance for 24-25, on our end, it's 2,051,743, but there is 2,294.
I will have to take a
Do you
look
see
at
what
it.
I'm saying?
Let me go back to that page.
The numbers are different in the ending fund balance for 24-25.
Yeah, the 2051 is the number, so it's not, looks like the ending fund balance did this on this slide. Looks like the slide died on me. Oops. Yeah, the printed budget is the correct number.
This was correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll have to re-update this
You
slide.
guys, 2,294,676,
Mhm.
plus 42,000, less 285,000 would be the 2,051,743.
Yeah, that's why I wanted
Yeah.
to make sure I was looking at.
Yeah,
Well,
once we copy Yeah, so once we copy things, tables into this,
Yeah,
sometimes,
Yeah,
yeah, let's get
those are-
changed.
No, I think the formula is just broken on the bottom.
Oh,
okay.
it's broken, oh, okay,
Yeah, I'm sure it's a formula in there.
okay. Good question.
All right. Let's get to capital fund requirements. So again, that's just going to show the use or potential use of the monies in there. And then finally to the internal service fund. And same format. So you're going to see the beginning fund balance is going to be sitting there right around, we're anticipating $5.7 million by the end of the year. And we're going to have $3.7 million coming in, 10 million spent. We will have transfers coming into the fund. And that is transfers coming in from the general fund to pay for tier 2 expenditures is what actually goes on here. And then we'll have amounts left in reserve. And once again, this is even less useful to look at this viewpoint on here. We show it because that is what we do for Oregon budget law stuff. But the more useful view for looking at where does the revenue come from is to think of it by initiative. So as we look at the various ways it comes in, so we're going to get about $4.8 million of transfers in. 3.8 due to educational services being sold through tier 2. $450,000 of IT. You'll see $347,000 that's Medicaid administrative claims. So that is us collecting the fee off of running Medicaid administrative claims to pay for the stuff that we do for the service. And then business services that would be sold, same thing. Those are all transfers coming in. Then we also have people actually cutting us checks for. So we sell about $2.6 million of IT services through the various platforms that we have to both component and non-component districts. There's $780,000 of educational services sold. That is strictly to our component districts, so paid in excess of tier 2 funding. Medicaid administrative claims, that's us getting our own administrative claims for our institution. Some business services, and then EIECSE Medicaid, so they file for Medicaid reimbursements that is different than the MAC program. And we anticipate that we should be able to get in about $100,000 for that next year as well. So that's $3.8 million of cash coming in from other places. And then when we look at that beginning fund balance, that $4.4 million ESD operations is really like the reserve that sits in the fund. There's also an unemployment fund. We pay our own unemployment and we have a balance sitting in there to do it from. There's OAESD's $450,000 that's going to start there because we're going to send it to them. And then EIECSE Medicaid also has a beginning fund balance for their Medicaid claims as well. So same dollar total as the previous page, but this kind of lays it out by the service and the way that we think about it rather than by those categories that you see on the budget. Expenditures look familiar though. It's salaries, it's associated payroll. You're seeing roughly the same level of FTE that's going through each year. And no major changes. You will see though, I'm going to call out and see that 450,000 under transfers again. That is where we are saying that's where we're sending out that $450,000 because of OESD. And with that, that is the high level stuff. Are there any questions, right? We can only do so much high level up here. When you get to the detail is in the paper budget that we sent on there. Are there any questions you had or items that you want to go through?
I'm seeing Todd, you shake your head. We can, any questions from you? No, okay. All right. So I think this goes back to you, Jason. Yeah, so seeing that there are no questions, what we would ask for here is for you to have two different motions this evening. The first of which, and this is actually in your, Rocco can put it up on the screen here in a moment, but it's also on page 2 of your packet, which is the second page of your agenda, is that we actually need action to approve the budget for and actually the dates in here, I just realized are wrong. It should say the 26-27 budget and the aggregate amount of 90,295,000. And then the other action that we need is to approve the permanent tax rate of 3049 cents per 1,000 value and levy for the general fund. So two motions that we need. If you look at the proposed language in the budget, you'll just need to say 25, 26, 27 rather than what's in there. It's actually correct up on the screen if you want to use that as a sample motion.
Well, I move to approve the Lynn Benton Lincoln Education Service District budget for 2026 through 2027 in the aggregate amount of 90,295,000 be approved as recommended by staff.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded to approve the Lynn Benton Lincoln Education Service District budget for 2026-2027 in the aggregate amount of 90,295,000 be approved as recommended by staff. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All those against say no. All right. We have unanimously approved the Lynn Benton Lincoln Education Service District budget for 2026-27 in the aggregate amount of 90,295,000 be approved as recommended by staff. And then next is the motion for the permanent tax rate.
I move to approve the permanent tax rate of 0.3049 per 1,000 in value be levied in support of the general fund. This tax rate is expected to generate 10,325,000 in taxes.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the permanent tax rate of 0.3049 per 1,000 value be levied in support of the general fund. This tax rate is expected to generate 10,325,000 in taxes. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those against say no. All right, we have unanimously approved the permanent tax rate of 0.3049 per 1,000 value to be levied in support of the general fund, generating 10,325,000 in taxes.
Okay, thank you so much. If you take a look at item G on your agenda, we can disregard that because we do not need a subsequent budget meeting. So we just approved it. We are done. So and we have no future agenda items at this time to discuss. And so that is it for us.
Okay, we'll adjourn at 7:44. Everyone.